Welcome back. Following the deaths of George Floyd in May, many cities saw weeks of unrest, including in Burlington. Then came a 35-day encampment at City Hall Park. Among the calls for change, protesters wanted 3 Burlington police officers fired for their connections to use of force incidents. And in the middle of it all, the interim police chief, Jennifer Morrison, said she wouldn't come back, saying, quote, "Too many members of the current council are more interested in social activism than good governance." I talked with Mayor Miro Weinberger about his conversation with Morrison and more.
We did talk about that critique, and I understood why, especially given everything where she is in her career and everything else that she has going on with her family situation, that she didn't feel she was, she felt taking the steps she made at the time, taking that step was the right thing for her, and I didn't try to talk her out of that, given my understanding of her thinking and where she was in her career.
Is the relationship right now between the council and police strained?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say it is strained. I think it's not just, I think there is a big disconnect, Lauren, between how, and I think this is true in general in America, and I think it's certainly true here in Burlington. I think that the public at this point in 2020 is lurking in many ways at policing and law enforcement and sees those issues in one way, and the way that the people actually have to go out, put themselves on the line for the community, do this challenging work day in and day out. They, in many cases, have a really different perspective on these same issues. And you see that reflected in that tension and that disconnect between a big chunk of the council and the police. When I say we need to forge a new consensus on policing, I'm aimed really at that disconnect and that tension. I think that chasm right now is too wide, and we've got to come to some new shared understanding of how we're going to go about things. And I think there's a lot of area for common ground. I think we can get it done, especially now that, I hope we are focused looking forward and no longer continuing to have these debates on events that were 18 months and 2 years ago. I think now that we're having a forward-looking, policy-based conversation and talking about structural change, we're talking about cultural change, I think we can get to that new consensus.
Do you find yourself at all sometimes then in a hard spot, maybe mediating between the two sides?
Absolutely, Lauren. I think it's one of the hardest things that I've had to do as mayor, and I felt some level of that throughout my time, not just now, but from when I stepped into this office. And that's why I'm so committed to this and taking these extraordinary steps to try to address it. I think it is clear to me that this is a disconnect, a chasm that is not going to go away without some really hard work and some just tackling this conversation in a new way that's eluded us. And really, I think it's not just us. I mean, I think every community in America, to one degree or another, is struggling with this. No community has really gotten the issues of race and law enforcement and policing completely right. I think we're now focused on it as a country, as a community, and we're at a moment where I have great optimism we can make change and get it right.
Has the search for a new chief resumed? I know it was put on the back burner at the start of COVID. Has it resumed?
No, I announced, I think it was in April, that I was suspending the search and did not intend to resume it until next March, until after town meeting day next year. I thought, and I think that was the right decision. I think it would have been an extraordinarily difficult time to. I made that announcement before everything that happened with George Floyd. I just thought it was in the middle of the pandemic, when travel was restricted, when people aren't allowed to gather and sit with potential new chiefs. I didn't see how we could possibly do the work that would be necessary to get to consensus on this critical community appointment. I also thought, we have a mayoral election coming up next March, and I think it'd be also hard for that reason. Even if conditions improved like they had by the fall, I just didn't think it would be very hard to recruit a good candidate with the uncertainty, just in the lead up to an election like that. So that I think puts even more importance on this position, this director of police transformation. If we don't have someone who has that kind of status as a permanent chief, I think it's even more important to have a leader like Kyle involved in discussions about where we're going from here in law enforcement.
So Kyle Dodson will then work maybe hand in hand, is that fair to say, with Deputy Chief John Murad going forward until March?
That's exactly right. That's why, you know, I had Chief Murad there with me at the announcement. They are absolutely going to be working very closely together on communications, policy, planning around the future of the Burlington Police Department.
We thank Mayor Miro Weinberger. We'll be right back.